in the early church councils. These early church councils were gatherings of as many bishops in the world as they could gather together. And they were held in Greek-speaking cities of the old Roman Empire, places like Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, Chalcedon. And the right results of these councils were in a certain sense spelled out in the Nicene Creed that we recite after the homily every Sunday. And the terms they used, of course, the terms they were familiar with, were the terms of Greek philosophical thinking. The first question, who is Jesus Christ? Now, the second great question has been, how is the individual Christian saved? This really began with St. Augustine in the first years of the 5th century. And it's a question Christians have wrestled with ever since. As you know, it was the great bone of controversy between Catholics and Protestants at the time of the Reformation. Now, here's my pet idea, okay? I think that's what's been happening in recent years is that we've lost interest in this salvation question, all right? I know there are still some people who are obsessed with the idea of salvation. Brother, are you saved, okay? But I think people stop really worrying about it. Maybe we should, but I think we stopped, and I think believing, concerned Christians are now returning to that first question. Who is Jesus Christ? Who is he? What are the implications of our answer to this question in terms of ourselves personally and for all of us as a church community? Now, I know, yes, we recite the words of the Creed. Who is Jesus? True God from true God, one in being with the Father. By the power of the Holy Spirit, he was born of the Virgin Mary and became man. Yes, Jesus Christ is fully God and fully human. But how does that work? How does that work? How can you be God and be a human being at the same time? What would that be like? What would that be like? What went on in the mind of Jesus? Now, we're told in St. Paul's letter to the Philippians that when the Son of God became human, he emptied himself. He emptied himself. And so he must have surrendered something of his divine awareness. Because if Jesus were simply God, walking around in a human body in Galilee, knowing absolutely everything, the future, everything going on in the minds and hearts of everybody, he wouldn't have been much of a human being. Now, as you know, the church, again, over the centuries, has really felt a strong need to defend the divinity of Christ, okay? To insist on the divinity of Christ. He's God, all right? Of course, there have always been people who want to make Jesus simply a great human being, okay? He's a prophet. He's a wise man. He's a charismatic figure, but no more than that, really. But we've insisted so much, so strong, so strongly, so often that he's God. Remember that. He's God, that if we're not careful, we can lose sight of his humanity, and in doing so, lose sight of his closeness to us. Well, all right, with all that as background, what are the lessons that we see in today's scriptures? First of all, Jesus is God, and he's in charge, all right? Notice in the story, he rebuked the wind and the sea. Be quiet, be still. You always need to remember that. And secondly, don't complain about his fairness and the way he does things. A lot of insight in that first reading today, a very short bit from the book of Job. The book of Job is a long book in which Job was a really good man, and he's treated really unfairly by God, given all sorts of miseries, and he complains to God, complains and complains. Finally, God answers and basically say, who are you to judge me? Who are you? Huh? God does not have to explain himself to us. So therefore, we're not to complain like the disciples in today's gospel story did about his lack of care or concern. Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing? Notice, by being human, Jesus has experienced our cares, concerns, and our anxieties. He knows what it's like because he has been one of us. And as Jesus says in the story, don't be afraid. He says, why are you terrified? You know, be not afraid is a great theme of all four Gospels. It comes up again and again and again. Be not afraid. Don't be afraid. Now, in ancient times, and that's part of today's story, people were very much afraid of the sea, okay, the ocean or the Mediterranean Sea, the sea, even the Sea of Galilee. They felt the sea was full of monsters, all right? And so when they were in a ship or a boat, they stayed close to the shore, all right? Their boats had only one of these dinky little sails, or to get around, they had to row, all right? But notice, is Jesus concerned? No, he falls asleep in the stern of the boat. And finally, have faith, have faith. Jesus says to these disciples, do you not yet have faith? In our second reading today, St. Paul tells us that he, Jesus of course, died for all, so that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. So to wrap this all up, Jesus is God, he's in charge, not to worry. Jesus, human. He knows what it's like to be one of us. He died for us, he loves us. So don't be afraid, have faith.